Hey chess players, let's see if we can beat my friend Mr. Robotvinnik. You'll notice in this game I have 2 rooks, and Mr. Robotvinnik has got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pawns. So he's got all of his pawns, but I put them on the same files here so that they can't defend one another. That means our rooks are going to be able to gobble them up. Let's see, how many points is a rook worth? Well, a rook is worth 5. Yeah, and I have 2 of them, so how many points do I have? That's right, 10. So I have 10 points because I have 2 rooks, and they are 5 points each. The pawn is only worth 1 point. So even though Mr. Robotvinnik has got a whole bunch of pawns, he's got 8 of them, it's still only 8 points. So I should be able to win here because my 2 rooks together are worth 10, and these 8 pawns, well, they're only worth 8. All right, let's see if I can beat Mr. Robotvinnik. I'm going to use my rook to gobble his pawns. Let's see how he responds. My plan in this game is to use my rook, my monster rooks, to gobble his pawns, and then make a checkmate. So my rooks are working together to attack his pawns. You could use this strategy too when you try to beat Mr. Robotvinnik. If you put your rooks on the same line, notice how they protect each other. This means I can take this pawn, and Mr. Robotvinnik cannot actually take my rook because it's protected by the other rook. Of course, he knew that. I'm going to take this pawn now, and he only has 2 pawns left. Let's see, what's he going to do? It looks like he's trying to push his pawn. I'm going to use my rook to pin that pawn to the king so it couldn't move, and now my other rook can come down and gobble it. So now Mr. Robotvinnik is left with his last pawn, and I'm going to go try and eat his pawn. I have to be careful. I was going to step my king forward to go eat this pawn, but if I did, then my king would be blocking this rook from protecting this one. Mr. Robotvinnik would just take my rook. Now, of course, I could still win, but it's better to keep 2 rooks if you can, so I'm going to put my rook over here where it's safe. All right, Mr. Robotvinnik is going to try to defend his pawn, but I'm not going to let him. I'm going to gobble this pawn. All right, I did it. I got all of his pawns. I beat Mr. Robotvinnik. Wait a second. The game is still going. Oh, that's right. I have to checkmate him. All right, well, let's see. How can I make a checkmate? I'm going to use my rook to trap his king on the edge of the board like this. So now his king is stuck on the edge of the chessboard. And then I'll use my other rook to come down. And while this rook traps him on the edge, this rook will deliver a checkmate. All right, that was... there we go. That was great. Mr. Robotvinnik played valiantly, but he was no match for the 2 rooks. All right, if you are able to beat Mr. Robotvinnik using your 2 rooks, and you're like, hey, you know what, Mr. K, that was actually pretty easy, here's a special challenge for you. Let's go back to the beginning. This time, I'm going to try to make a checkmate with only 1 rook. So I'm not going to use this rook down here at all in the game. I'm just going to use this rook and see if Mr. Robotvinnik will be able to beat me this time. It's a little bit harder because now I'm not going to be able to protect this rook because I'm not going to bring this rook in the game. I'm just going to try to beat him with 1 rook. Sort of like battling with 1 hand tied behind my back. Let's see if I'm able to do it. All right, I have to use my king though. My king is an important part of the endgame, and here I'm able to use my king to gobble up this pawn. Aha! Uh-oh, but that pawn is looking like it might make it to the other side. So let's grab this pawn, and then my rook could safely come back here to capture this one just in case. All right, he's down to his last pawn. So I'm going to save my rook, and now what I'm going to try to do is make a checkmate with just my rook. Of course, I could play a checkmate right now. Do you spot the checkmate I could play? That's right, I could play rook a1, and that would be a checkmate. But I'm trying to do a challenge checkmate. I'm trying to checkmate with just my king and rook. Let's see if I can do it. All right, so I've got Mr. Robotvinnik's king inside of a little box here, and I'm going to squeeze him towards the edge of the chessboard. I can't really squeeze the box any smaller now. I realize I'm going to have to waste a turn. All right, let's move our king back. That's a smaller box. So now I'm pushing him towards the edge of the chessboard, and here I can't really squeeze the box any smaller. So I'm going to move my king. Now there is a checkmate. There's actually two different checkmates. This is the one I was planning on. All right, Mr. Robotvinnik, very well played. If you guys would like to try to beat Mr. Robotvinnik, the link to play this game is in the description. You'll be playing with the white pieces. Mr. Robotvinnik has the black pieces. Good luck if you're able to beat him. Let me know in the comments.